Oregon takes on Iowa this weekend, Joe. We don't know if Iowa's going to be ranked in this week's rankings. I'm assuming they will be on the college football playoff rankings, but we know that Oregon will. Let's just assume it's going to be a ranked game. But Oregon versus Iowa, what are your thoughts?
Oregon is a 6.5-point favorite over at FanDuel if you're going to be betting on this game. Blake, I think that Oregon really needs this game for anyone who's been doubting how they sit in the perspective of the top teams in college football. It feels like things have cooled on them quite a bit since the Indiana game, and especially because of the way that the Penn State game no longer has the same level of shine that it once had. I think a lot of passersby that haven't been paying attention to Iowa, I think a lot of those people don't understand how good this Iowa team is. I went back and watched Iowa's performance against Minnesota, and man, that game was an ass whooping. If anyone missed that game, I implore you to go back and watch what transpired there. Every level of the field, they dominated a good Minnesota team. I believe they're 6-3 right now. This is not a bad Minnesota team that they smoked. They scored a punt return touchdown. They forced multiple turnovers with just big plays, and then they also were able to completely maul Minnesota on the ground. Like, I think that Oregon's going to win this game as we open up this conversation. I think that they need to start fast. They need to attack, and they need to put Iowa on their heels in order to be chasing them because they're just not going to be as naturally explosive. But, like, this Iowa offense is very creative when they come to running the football. And this defense, as has always been under Phil Parker, is really damn well coached. This is a legit challenge and one that should be a ranked-on-ranked matchup if it weren't for the AP poll being really bad at their jobs.
Well, the AP poll is irrelevant now because college football playoff rankings are coming out, right. So it's completely irrelevant. I am wondering, Joe, going into this one, when you have Oregon, who they haven't been bad offensively throwing the football around. They're 50th in the country in passing yards. But you're going up against a top 5 ranked secondary in Iowa, who's always been really good under Phil Parker, as you alluded to. What are the challenges that this Iowa defense is going to present for Oregon? Now, I agree with you. Basically, what you're saying is over time in this game, you probably feel like the athletes are going to overtake. This offense can't score enough if you're Iowa. If Oregon does start making mistakes and they start turning the ball over, this one's going to get pretty damn interesting if Iowa can't upset them here. But Joe, you're right. I don't want to say the only way that Iowa can succeed here, and I'm not saying that the only way that they win is if Oregon makes mistakes. You're going to have to force some turnovers to give your offense the ball to have time of possession to go in there and score. If this gets anywhere north of 24, 25 points, I don't know if Iowa can score enough points to win it. You're talking about still one of the worst passing offenses in the country. They're 130th in the country. They're 119th in total offense. They're not even really good at time of possession, by the way. They try to hold on to the football, play smash mouth football, really good defense. Joe, they're not doing that well right now for what it's worth. But this defense is very opportunistic. They're really good in defending the run. They're really good in the secondary. The only thing that they haven't been great at is getting off the field on third down. They're not in the top 25 there. It's the only statistical category that they're not in the top 25 in defensively. Just another really good Iowa defense. Joe, I just don't know how they score. I mean, every time that you and I talk about Iowa, this is legitimately one of those situations where I just can't – I don't know where and how these situations continue to transpire here when they're so bad offensively. But the bottom line is they're really good on defense. They can turn the ball over. I just don't know if they can score enough. Like, I really don't. And that's going to constantly be the reason why I think teams like Oregon will continue to beat them, even though they're really good on defense.
I'd just like to slightly reframe for Iowa. I think that they've shown an ability to succeed offensively and to produce big games. When they've blown teams out, it's been the result of their defense setting them up with some really favorable short fields, which has been advantageous for them. And then we just mentioned, like, they get a lot of big special teams plays as well. They're actually very efficient at running the football. They're 25th in the country in EPA per rush. Where they have problems, and why I alluded to at the beginning, if you attack and you build a quick 10-point lead, I would feel very uncomfortable if I was an Iowa fan trying to play catch-up 124th in EPA per pass in the country. They are just not an efficient, explosive offense when it comes to trying and generating plays through the air. I've been a Mark Gronowski fan. I think that he's shown since the beginning of the year when he was really struggling some improvements with his abilities as a passer. But he has to be able to take a couple of shots here and there if this game does end up being in a spot where they are trailing. The one big guy that we got to pay attention to, Caden Weegan, I believe I'm pronouncing that right. That dude is a do-it-all offensive weapon for this Iowa team. I'm shocked that more people are not talking about him nationally just as one of the better playmakers in college football. That kid does so much for this team. The one big major challenge that comes into all of this for Oregon, Blake. Oregon, and this is very quietly been happening, and I'm surprised that we haven't discussed this more. They only have 13 sacks on the year. Their pass rush has not been as productive as we thought it was going to be. Now, they've got a really good front seven. Amari Washington, we love. We love Mateo Uyunglele. Bear Alexander has been really solid for them. Them not being able to get after the passer is going to be really troublesome when they're facing this Iowa team with one of the best offensive lines in the country, only allowed 11 sacks on the year, and they've got a lot of really, really solid dudes from Gennings Dunker to Logan Jones. That is going to be a really, really tough battle for them. They got to find ways to produce success. Otherwise, Oregon could be the team that's on their heels because they're not able to generate penetration, and they're also not able to get all over Mark Gronowski.
I got to be real with you. Here's another thing. You bring this up, and I just want to throw this your way. If they're able to get after more and they're able to limit this run game, kind of like what Indiana did, I got to be blunt with you. I think this one could be a little bit of a dogfight for Oregon.
Oh, I agree with that. I think they're going to cover that 6.5 point spread, but they win.
I do too, but I also sit here and say to myself, like, Joe, I got to be – I hate to say this, and Oregon fans are going to yell at me in the comments for saying this. You kind of are in a prove-it spot a little bit, right? Because what do we know about Oregon at the current moment? Look, you went into a hostile environment against Penn State. You went in double overtime. You basically ended the James Franklin era. Like, let's just be blunt. Okay, you go up against the next best team that you face in Indiana, and you're unable to really sustain. You're unable to finish drives. You're unable to push the ball down the field enough, and you can't do it. Well, Joe, I got to be real with you. I think a lot of people have cooled on Oregon, and it's not that they should care or that they do care at all. But I got to be real with this is a prove-it game for me in a lot of ways for Oregon. Not so much Iowa. Iowa is who Iowa is. They're the same team every single year. They got Vander Beck, Vander Esch, Vander this, Vander that. Every Vander in the country plays for Iowa, I feel like, every single year. But you get what I'm saying here. They're the same team. You know what you're getting from Iowa. What am I going to get from this Oregon team that's about to get tested? Listen, man, you have not been efficient in throwing the football the last month. And that is not an opinion. That is a fact. If you take out the first month versus what you've done now, going from the number one passing offense in the country, where you're now sitting at 50th, Joe, there's been a little bit too much clunkiness with these young wide receivers. And with Moore here, can they find a way to really push the ball down the field when they need to with a really talented unit? They're all talented. Oregon's got more talent than anybody. They're inexperienced. Can they start building on that? And I think it's a massive prove-it game for Oregon this weekend.
I don't think it's unfair to assert that on Oregon. I think that they're going to take advantage of proving it. But here's where I think that the perspective has to lie based on the outcome. Just because Oregon wins this game by 4 does not mean that they are, they played a bad game and they're overrated or whatever. I don't want to hear any narratives from across the country that this Oregon team struggled with Iowa and it means that they've got XYZ issue. They're going on the road to Iowa in what is typically one of the most hostile environments in the Big Ten. This is a typical upset spot for a lot of teams. So the way that I'm ultimately putting this perspective, as you're saying, it is a prove-it moment. If they win this thing and they win it close, that to me is incredibly impressive. I agree with you on this. Dante Moore has been tremendous. He got banged up in the Wisconsin game. It feels like he's still playing at a great level, but like he's the same way that this Oregon team is cooled a little bit. They're going up against what is a very well-coached and efficient, consistent, steady defense secondary for Iowa. They are going to keep everything in front of them. They've got very underrated athletes across the board in their secondary. They're going to be able to make plays if Dante Moore takes risks that aren't worth taking. I think that we're going to really find out, and I think really establish a new perspective on how we talk about this Oregon team based on how this team goes.
Joe, I know we yell about this in the power rankings, but it's just the truth. I've cooled on them a lot because you talk about domination for teams like Indiana. What is the dominant thing that you do if you're Oregon? Do you do anything dominant? Now, I know you can go statistically, they do this. They're really good in pass defense. They're first in the country in passing yards allowed. Okay, but I also saw Indiana's receivers really out-physical you in a lot of big situations. Wisconsin can't throw the ball to save their life. I mean, there are teams in the Big Ten that you play that can't throw the ball to save their life. You're going up against another one. Look, I'm going to lean Oregon here, but this is a massive prove-it game for them and for me to see them this weekend, and we'll see how they see what they're able to do here.
Yeah, we'll see what ends up transpiring, but I think Oregon wins. It's another opportunity to kind of establish themselves. I just hope Iowa's ranked on the committee ranking, and this game has a little bit more cachet to it, a little bit more excitement to it, because they should be. Iowa should be ranked. They're much better than they're getting credit for.
Well, look, I think that there's teams let me give an example. I'm just going to throw this out there. Brother, they're probably going to have BYU in the top 10 tonight, and I'm going to freak out.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
I'm going to freak out. So you can come back later to the channel when Blake is going to freak out on BYU. But it is what it is there. It is what it is. Prove it game for Oregon. Let's see what they're able to do here. All right, let's move on.